this is science for cycle 3, week 4. Today we'll be talking about lung capacity. So you can start, as always, by going through the Bible verse at the top of the page in your lesson plan. And that just talks about how God gives us everything we need, including the breath of life. And you can talk through what that means for us and how we depend on God for everything, even the breath in our lungs. And then you can move into talking about our lungs, because that is what we will be focusing on today. So have your class take some nice, long, slow breaths for maybe 10 to 20 seconds, depending on their age, and then have them try taking kind of short, quick breaths for maybe 10 to 20 seconds, and just have them observe and share with you the results that they notice. They might notice that they feel more out of breath when they're taking those really quick breaths. They feel like maybe their chests are expanding more when they're taking those long, deep breaths. So just have them share what they notice as they're taking those different types of breaths. And then you can move into talking about what our hypothesis or what our experiment is going to be about today. So we're going to talk about how we can, or whether there is a difference in the amount of air that our lungs take in based on how we are taking breaths. So how does our lung capacity, the amount of air that our lungs are able to hold, change when we're breathing in those slow, deep breaths or the really quick and short breaths? So for our research portion, there's some pictures that show the anatomy of the lungs. You can talk about the process of gas exchange that is happening in our lungs all the time, that our lungs exist to be able to take in oxygen, which is a gas that we get from the air around us, that each of our cells needs to be able to create energy and to be able to do their job. And then our cells actually give back the carbon dioxide, which is another gas that they create as a waste product from the jobs that they can do. So that process of exchanging those two gases is what's happening in our lungs, and that's why we need our lungs and why we need the air around us. You can look at the anatomy of the lungs in one of those images, talk about the trachea that comes down and then splits into the bronchi in our two lungs into really teeny tiny passageways called bronchioles, and then eventually leads to our alveoli, which are these teeny tiny air sacs in the lungs where the gas exchange is actually happening. Later on, as in a few weeks when we get to talking about the circulatory and respiratory systems, we'll talk about how that gas is brought, the oxygen gas that comes in is brought through our blood cells to cells all over our body. And we'll talk about how the carbon dioxide is again brought through our blood vessels back to the lungs. So we'll get to talk about that a little bit more later. So just focus on the lungs today and the process of gas exchange that's happening. And then you can have your class take kind of a poll of your class, have them hypothesize what will be different about how much air our lungs take in and breathe out when we're taking short breaths versus really long, slow breaths. Have them make their hypothesis, and then we'll move into our experiment. And today's experiment is a little bit of a messy one, so you might need to bring a little bit of extra patience with you, but luckily the mess is all just water. So I'm going to show you what the supplies are for our experiment, and then I'll go through it. So first of all, you'll each have a big tub like this. Before you start science, have one of the moms run out and fill this tub halfway full with water. You don't want to go a lot over halfway full, or you're going to have water spilling all over the place, but you need it filled about halfway. Then you will have a jug like this, a milk jug, that one of the moms also will need to have completely full of water, as full as they can get it. You'll notice that the milk jug has gradations on the side. And those are by 10-ounce increments. So if I hold it upside down, you'll notice that it goes from 10 ounces all the way up to about 130 ounces measured up. So that is how we will measure the results of today's experiment, by measuring the water displaced by our breathing. Then each student will get about a 2-foot length of this aquarium tubing. I'll have their names written with masking tape. They will be putting their mouths around this, so that's why we don't want them exchanged between each other. This way we can still do the experiment without having to touch the same areas with our mouths. Make sure that they know not to whip this around or do lots of extra things with it, and to keep it clean, since they will be putting their mouths around it. And then I will bring in one of these clear measuring cups, but I only have one. If a couple other tutors wouldn't mind bringing in a couple of these, They're really handy between experiments to get our water jug filled back up with water. So I'm going to have a helper come and help me with the experiment. This one may be an experiment where you need to have some mom's help. Oh, I forgot to mention, I will also send along beach towels that you can use on the table, because again, some water may get sloshed around, especially as you're first figuring out the experiment. All right, so here is my helper, Julia. So this is going to be her tubing. So what you'll do for each kid, you will do this experiment and collect the results. There are some pages in the back of this lesson plan where you can jot down the results for each kid, and you can have a mom help with that, or even students jot down their results if you have an older class. So what you're going to do is you're going to flip this full container that's full of water upside down into the water in your tub. So you can do it with the cap on and then remove the cap underwater after it's flipped. I found it's much easier to just have your hand fixed tightly over the bottle and then flip it over. I'm going to flip this over, losing as little water as possible. You're going to lose a little bit of water, so there will be a little bit of empty space, but you want to try to keep this as full as possible. So now it is inverted, flipped over onto the tub, or into the tub. Okay, so now Julia's holding one end of her tube that she's going to breathe into. I'm going to take the other end of the tube and I'm going to stick it into the jug here. So you can kind of tilt the jug to the side a little bit, trying not to lose too much of the water. You want to make sure that you are not kinking the tubing, otherwise this won't work very well. And now we're going to have Julia try this 2 times. She's going to take a short breath and breathe out, and then she's going to take a long breath and breathe out. I'm going to have her just do the long breath right now for the sake of the length of this video. So go ahead and take a deep breath in, Julia, and then blow out as hard as you can through that tubing. Good work, girl. All right, so she blew out a lot of water with that breath. So now we can measure on the side here. She got to about 75 ounces maybe of water displaced by her breath. So that is the result that you would jot down for her. So again, if you have time, you can restart the experiment and have each student do both a short breath and a long breath. Make sure they know to only breathe out rather than breathing in through that tubing. But now what we'll do is reset our experiment. Thank you, Julia. Is reset our experiment by refilling this jug. This is where the measuring cup is going to come in handy, and where you can get a little messy. If they displace a lot of water, some of it might spill out if you have too much water in your tub. You may have students who are able to displace all of the water in the tub, and that's fine too. Probably most of the adults could displace all of the water in the carton, which is totally fine. So like I said, there's a sheet in your lesson plan where you can record results. There's also a little graph there. It doesn't have any markings on it, but if you have time and want to show maybe your older class how you might be able to graph those results to make them a little bit easier to understand from a glance, you could use that as well. I will send along some kind of coloring pages about the lungs that maybe younger students can be working on, since you only have one student at a time that you can do this experiment, and that will require your full attention. And otherwise, that's pretty much it for the experiment. There is one more extra time activity. Oh, I guess I didn't talk about the analysis. So then you can analyze your results. You will find that, of course, as you're taking the deep, slow breaths out, you're going to displace a lot more water than quick breaths. And you can talk about how we can even work on the fitness of our lungs and work to increase our lung capacity as we perform endurance exercises like running or biking or swimming or those kind of things. So we can actually improve the health and capacity of our lungs in those ways. The last extra time activity that I have on there is just kind of a kinesthetic representation of the gas exchange going on in our cells. So you'll have a couple students who will be your alveoli, where the gas exchange is actually taking place in the lungs, and then some students who will be your body cells. So those could be any cells in our body, because all of our body cells need oxygen to be able to do their job. So they'll be body cells. And then you will have other students who will be red blood cells. So those students will be the messengers who are carrying gases back and forth. So you will have a bunch of CO2 or carbon dioxide circles, and then you'll have a bunch of O2 or oxygen circles. And so the body cells will start with this CO2, and the alveoli will start with this O2, and your red blood cells will be taking these back and forth to exchange them. So your red blood cells will pick up the carbon dioxide from the body cells, that's their waste product, and they will carry them over to the alveoli where they will exchange them, give the alveoli their carbon dioxide, which the alveoli are then going to breathe out. And then they will take the oxygen, which the alveoli have brought into the body, and the red blood cells will take those and be the messengers to carry those back to the body cells, and the whole process continues to repeat. Just to demonstrate, again, kind of kinesthetically, how that gas exchange is happening to make our bodies work, because our bodies need this oxygen gas. All right, and that is it for week 4 science. Good luck. I don't think you got it, Ben.
Mom,
Sorry.